Let's review the patch notes for 0.8.5. So this is a really big patch. I want to quickly go over it and give like my thoughts behind and the reasoning behind why we did certain changes. I think I might start doing this for every patch. I think it could be interesting for people to actually watch a video on patch notes compared to just reading it themselves, because I mean I did it with Hearthstone as well, and a lot of other people enjoy to just see someone break down the patch, especially someone who has knowledge on the patch, compared to just trying to go ingest it yourself. Because this is the first time I do it, I will also quickly go over the patches like 2 patches ago, just to have like a little bit of an idea of why certain things got changed. So I'm going to start with 8.3 because these patches are put out every 1 to 2 days. This was 4 days ago. This one was 2 days ago, and then so every 2 days there's been a patch. So let's start with 0.8.3 from 4 days ago. This patch is probably the biggest one yet, but likely the least noticeable. So I've always been doing very small patches like features, bug fixes, this, that. This was the first patch where there was actually like a big time span. I mean, with a big time span between it, I mean like 5 days or 4 days. I don't even remember how many, but that was already like the longest wait we had before a patch. And that was because I was rewriting a whole like bunch of systems. I basically rewrote every single unit. So I think it's a good idea to start from this patch on. But likely the least noticeable. So most people, if you just play the game normally, you wouldn't realize too much. So this was 33,000 lines added and 31,000 removed. This is code, but it's also like just if I make any changes, those lines are also in the project files. So anyway, big changes. I rewrote the whole combat system, created a new handler script to check unit collisions. So big issue was units spawning into each other. That was completely resolved here. I also improved general unit blueprint and rewrote all units. Most of this is kind of like explanation a bit more in depth about why the patch took so long to get out. And there's a lot more that I have to do, so there will be more bigger system changes, but luckily the patches shouldn't be taking that long, because here I had to wait until all the units are done before I push out a patch, otherwise the game breaks. But luckily the ones that I will be doing now, or I can do in chunks, so I can push out normal patches while doing big system changes. So the features, these were pretty big. Stuns now only work on cooldown units. So before, stuns could target non-cooldown units and then basically waste their stun. Right now they're always going to see if a unit has cooldown and then stun it. Units that summon other units now have proper collision system, so this is probably one of the biggest features. Highlights are now more accurate, responsive, and work in combat. I'm really happy with this. The highlight system was a bit wonky. Now it feels really good and intuitive. Whenever you hover over anything, it's going to highlight exactly what it affects. Even while you're dragging, there's no lag. There's way less, there's still like a very few issues with it. Like when you go very fast with your mouse over stuff, sometimes it can keep stuff highlighted, but that has been mostly resolved. And now also, I mean, that's for a future patch. There's more stuff I added to the highlight system in the future patches. Any damage buffs can no longer target weapons that can't be buffed, so now weapon buffs are not going to be wasted on let's say Weather Machine or on Warden's Flame, which is units that only get buffed through like adjacent defense units or from Tinker units. So units that can't be damage buffed now can't receive buffs. FPS is capped, so some people wanted FPS to be capped because their PC couldn't handle it. Normally this should be auto-resolved, like if your PC can't handle certain frames, it goes down automatically. But I just made this or implemented this because why not, then PCs will not like go for unnecessary frames, and it will be a setting later. I will expand upon the settings a lot so people can completely customize their experience, and hopefully people who have a little bit of a less good computer can still play properly. And there's a new song, and the last song, or not the last song, the third song, which is going to be for the combat, is also in the works already, so that will be added soon. Now I'm not going to go over the unit changes because the biggest patch today had an insane amount of unit changes, so we'll just go over that later. Bugs, this was mainly just small bug fixes that randomly will get fixed because I rewrote all the systems or big systems and a lot of the units, so a lot of random bugs got fixed because of that. And enchantments, there was a lot of issues with enchantments disappearing and not working. They now fully work as far as I'm aware. Then others, there is, yeah, this is basically the system changes that I made. I'm not going to go too in depth in these. I kind of want to do a more nerdy technical video, maybe for people who are game devs or are into Godot, because I had some people in Discord ask me questions about it to more show like how I handle the systems and how I reworked it, because I think it's interesting. So that means some people probably find it interesting as well. Fatigue scales lower, so a lot of people had issues with fatigue, going too fast, being too strong. And then it was just about who had more units on the board. That is now going to be different. You might also notice a slight performance boost, and this, some people pointed out, like the game runs a lot smoother. Now if you summon a lot of units at once, the game doesn't lag because, or maybe it was not this patch. There's just slight performance boost. No, I don't think it's actually this patch. I think it's the future patch. Oh no, it is this one. So if you summon a lot of units at once, that shouldn't give a big spike anymore. And a bunch of other small quality of life stuff that will just help with the performance. And that was it for this really big patch. Now, of course, some stuff broke right away because this was a lot of changes and I can't test everything by myself. So over the next 1 to 2 days, I did a lot of hotfixes. I did like 3 or 4 different patches, but these don't get added in the notes because it's mainly just random bugs that get fixed. But then the next big patch, 2 days later, has a bunch of features. Like a lot of people are constantly suggesting stuff in the Discord. I always write it down into a big list that I have, and the most interesting ones I add, and that is a lot of them. And there's still a lot that I do want to add, and luckily features are actually not that hard to implement most of the time. At most it takes me a couple hours, so that's why I can do frequent patches like these. The biggest time spent is actually just the systems. It is not adding content or features. It is usually making sure that everything doesn't break. So hovering over a weapon now highlights its target. So now during combat or when you're reviewing the battle phase, you can see what each weapon targets, what the closest unit is to it. So I really want the game to be as intuitive as possible. A lot of people early on had issues understanding everything, like, okay, does this work with this? Does this, where does this target? What is happening? The fights and stuff like that. I still need to add more particles and effects and like visuals. Now if you hover over anything, it's just going to give you a full breakdown on everything that I can interact with, everything that I will do, and I don't know, I'm happy with it. So even during combat you can pause and you can see exactly what is going on. You can also report bugs in game. Now this feature somewhat works, but it's not super reliable. So I get some bug reports in, so it's a separate Discord channel that a bot that I made posts in basically, and so people, their message gets posted in here and part of their logs, the first part and the last part. But I only got 3 in so far. I'm pretty sure there's more people that reported, so I don't know exactly what's going on there. But if you have a bug to report, I would suggest doing it manually in Discord still, because I don't know how reliable the system is yet. I still need to work on this. Leaderboard ranks got like a slight lift in presentation, so they have their colors and it highlights your name. This was also just a suggestion from someone in Discord, and it was very easy to add. Patch notes can be viewed in the main menu. I also still need to make this look better. Godot itself, the engine I work with, doesn't have the best way to like format the text, so I'm making my own text formatter, and I also need to change the fonts and stuff like that. That's another big change that has to come, the readability of everything. But you can view patch notes in the bottom left. The enchantments now stack, so all of your enchantments stack, which wasn't the case before. I think that's just a nice thing, because it makes more sense for that to happen. A lot of people don't know that it doesn't if you don't play the tutorial, because it's not specifically stated anywhere. Conditional units, so I also designed 3 new units here. 2 of them are conditional. This was a design choice because a lot of games you have units that only interact with others, like it's very specific synergy. The issue with that is that if you get one of those in the shop, it's useless until you hit the other, or like basically you get dead rolls, and you get, it happened a lot in games that I played. I'm not going to name any specific ones, but where I have a shop and like I only have one real option, the other ones do nothing for me. That feels really bad. So I want units that are like that to have the conditions, so they only show up if they're useful basically. Now that's why the design philosophy at the start was already, we only want units in the game that are always playable, always flexible, and in the changes that I made today, that's also going to reflect a bit better. But so I think so far this has been received well. These units can't be too strong, otherwise everyone will be forcing the same build and will be looking for the same units, and then there's RNG involved. We just want it to be like the item pool, slowly expanding if you buy certain units that make sense, to not like we basically want to reduce the level of bad shops, like the feeling of having a bad shop. And I think so far it's going well. We only had positive feedback, except for like people saying, hey, this unit is too weak or too strong. But I've heard both sides. Both of the new units I've heard are too strong or too weak. And I looked at the stats today, and they're both actually fine. They're both average, like most of the units should be. So I would call it a win until now. We'll see if we add more, what happens then. And when holding spacebar, you can now hover over every tag. So when you hold spacebar, this is like a little thing people don't know because it's not explained anywhere. But if you go to the settings, you can see it. It's more for like advanced players who want the game to be a bit like have more stats. If you hold spacebar, you can see all of the types that you have, like all sorted by their faction, their role, and their type. So you can decide whether or not you want to buy a unit. If you want to buy a unit and you hover over it, it's already going to show or highlight the types that you have. If it needs nature items, it's going to highlight all your natures, but you don't know how many that is. Let's say it gives like a buff per nature item you have. So that if you press space, you can see how many nature items you have. But now, if you hover over one of those tags, it highlights all your units with those tags. So let's say you want to set up for a weather machine build, and you need magic and tinker. And so if you press space, you can see you have this many tinker and this many magic. But if you just hover over them, you'll quickly see the units on your board highlighted, and you'll be like, for example, if you're doing a build that needs tinker units, like around the power plant, you see, hey, you have 5 tinker units, but there's only 2 of them around the power plant, and if you have trouble spotting them on your board, you can press space, hover over the tinker units, see where they are. It's just multiple people suggested this. This took a little bit longer to implement, with a little bit longer, I mean half an hour longer. But it's there, and I think it's a very nice feature to have. Then the units also, I'm not gonna, I mean, there's just new units. I didn't do any changes really, except the Materia Contrarium, the Novus item that splits buffs, now can buff multiple targets. This makes more sense intuitively. Regis also pointed this out. It doesn't really make sense that it only buffs one target. To me it did, but visually it doesn't, and it also is more fun and allows for more flexibility if you can split it over multiple targets. So now the buffs that you get from the health and the damage, you can choose to still put it on one unit, but if you put 2 or 3 units, it's still gonna divide them over those. So it allows for more playstyles, and I think that's a good thing generally. And Voodoo Totem got nerfed. Then we got the bot buffer and toy production, the 2 conditional units. And Taron. I needed more enchantment. I have a lot of enchantment units in mind still, but I want enchantings to be a bit more impactful in the game. Even though enchantments themselves, I don't want to be too strong. I think it's fun to turn it into an archetype as well, or like a build that you can go for, or another payoff to have enchantments. And I think this unit does it nicely. It gives some enchantments, and it also buffs based on the amount of enchantments that you have. So it also, with that, buffs stuff like the post office or the research facility that spreads enchantments on your board. This is also a buff to those, and it's been well received. It's been a fun unit to play with. Bugs, crashes are now fixed. I put crashes fixed in almost every patch notes, because every patch I keep fixing new crashes, but then for some reason new ones pop up. I think there's one right now that I haven't fixed because I don't know what causes it. I only saw it happen once, and there was no clear thing that caused it. I can only check it if I have it happen myself, or if someone sends me the logs. But every other crash that was posted in Discord, I was able to track down and fix. Defense Nature Shop, there was something wrong with it. Prismatic Mirror can loop infinitely, and that was kind of an issue. Proliferator was broken. Now, you could overlap units if you were too fast, like placing stuff. A lot of people had this happen. And then Bufferbot didn't work. I also have a public GitHub repo now. Now this thing, I need to go back to the patch notes. That thing I'm really happy with. I'm keeping this updated still. It's what I use to display the patch notes in game. But this basically allows everyone who knows a little bit about like websites or about coding, or anyone who knows or wants to make tools, makes like a library, make whatever you want to make. I'm going to provide those tools for you. So a lot of games don't do this, or they do this in a limited capacity. Like Hearthstone has like a website library. Backpack has their wiki. I'm not good with website design. I don't know how to make a website. I know how to make an item library, but in game. But so basically you have this unit data JSON that I'm keeping updated every patch. And this is just a big file a big JSON file that holds all of the unit data, all of the stats that you would ever need. So you can load it in, read from it, do whatever you want. This doesn't have images yet, but we do have a public drive. We do have a public drive in which you put the images of the units so you could link them. And then there's also this one which just displays the latest patch. So that way you can go in the patch notes and just fetch it. So I'm putting every patch in here as well as a markdown file so you can display it wherever you want. My voice is acting up. Okay, now finally to today's patch, the big patch 8.5. Also quick note, the next patch will probably be in the weekend, so it will be a little bit longer as well, like 4 to 5 days. That's why I did kind of a bigger one now, but I didn't do any big system changes, so nothing can in theory break that wasn't already broken. I just added a few simple features that shouldn't cause issues, and a bunch of balance changes. So, and these can all be fixed through hotfixes anyway, so if some unit would be too strong or weak, I can still fix it. First, let's go over the features. We got a new type in the game. I think this is the first time we add a new type. I think so. I don't think we've added actually any new ones. We also don't want to add too many because then it will get too complex. But this is basically next to offense, defense, and utility. We now have solo. So these are like less used types anyway. Defense is the only one that's really used, utility, and offense not really. But it's basically a way for us to categorize units, like town units, weapons, could be anything, into their own category, which is mainly, well, I'll just read. One of the consistent best things to do in the game has been fast triggering powerful units. Some units, the saloon, mill, and the mechanic, had to specifically state which units they cannot trigger. Instead, we're putting all of them under the solo tag, units that can't be triggered by other solo units. This allows us to put units like Myria in the solo category and allows design space for more powerful effects with long cooldowns that won't just break the game with instant trigger effects. So it's kind of the same thing with every game or every card game. The OTKs and the one-shots and the like super early builds that just try and burst people. They're fun to try and make work. I always liked it, but they're very annoying to face because it feels like you have no counterplay if you just die in a couple seconds. It's been an issue for most games. I don't think we want that at all with our islands. It feels really bad. I do like combos a lot. I like scaling. I do think there's some place for it to like insta trigger stuff. That's why we have the jump starter still, but it shouldn't lead to an instant victory. So that's why Spellbound Rocket, how we originally fixed it, was it had a very long cooldown, it had like really big burst damage, and it would just destroy boards. So then we scaled it down to make the cooldown way lower and turn it more into a normalish weapon. Like the damage of it and the explosive damage got scaled down a lot to make it fit into that normal weapon category, but it was still too strong. And so we had to keep scaling it down, and eventually it couldn't even target weapons because then people would just instantly wipe your opponent's weapons and then you just lose. Even though you can counter it, most people didn't, and it still feels bad to lose to. But instead it's way cleaner if we just, for example with Myria, the same thing, it has a 14-second cooldown because it has a very powerful effect. But sadly, putting long cooldowns on powerful effects doesn't work in a game, especially with town units where you can just insta-trigger them through multiple different ways. And so extending times is not relevant if you can insta trigger them. So instead we're just going to give them a tag that means you can't trigger them through any other source. It is specified in game. Saloon, mill, and mechanic do say they cannot trigger other solo units, so it should make sense to people who don't even read the patch notes either. And also the highlighting system works, so you can see it doesn't highlight it, but so that way Myria can only be triggered by itself. You can still speed it up, so we still want these units to be able to sped up and like build around, but not to just insta fire a bunch of times. Yeah, it opens up a lot of design space. You can make more cool powerful effects with long cooldowns without being scared of it breaking, which I really like. This was also a suggestion by Regis. This was, he was like, hey, it doesn't make sense to have all of this work like this. Let's just make a new tag, and I think it's an elegant solution. Now, holding spacebar, like I said, to display the extra stats, now also shows your grid layout. This was another suggestion that I heard multiple times because people want to see their grid space that they have without having to drag a unit. So now you can just hold space and you can see your grid layout. And this is also, I'm really happy with this feature and the fact that it works so well. If you hover stuff in the combat logs, it now highlights it. So if you have your combat logs and you see like a bunch of weapons or triggers, and you don't know, okay, which one is this? There's like 5 post offices. Which one is the one that triggered 20 times? You can hover over it and it's going to highlight that exact one. So you can now, in the logs, quickly hover over any unit and it will highlight that exact unit on the board. Then fatigue starts 10 seconds later. So it's happened a lot where people get frustrated at fatigue deciding games, even though fatigue is a mechanic that you can play around, you can build for fatigue, stack a lot of HP, there's a lot of things you can do. It doesn't make sense if you're supposed to be winning, but if the fight lasted 2 seconds longer, you would have won, but then fatigue happens and you lose. That feels bad. So I'm extending fatigue now. I already reworked the wizard so that way he starts at only 40 damage and scales up slowly, so that way it doesn't just start one-shotting everything right away. He actually has to do multiple hits in bigger units. So in theory, builds that are made for fatigue should still win fatigue. Like if you set up for a lot of HP, stuff like that. But if you are scaling a lot and if you are clearly stronger than your opponent, you should also still win even if you go to fatigue. Does that make sense? We might still have to rework fatigue even more, but for now I'm just gonna see how this feels. 40 seconds I think is fine. It's not too long and you can speed up fights anyway. That is it. Then what I did this morning was I went through all of the units, every single one of them. And then I checked on the server their stats, because we log the stats per patch, so I've been logging them every single patch. I've been kind of keeping track, and in this latest patch we had like 4,000 builds total, so I think we had a big enough sample size. A lot of, like, the tree got played in the tens of thousands of times, for example. So I think we had enough data to conclude a lot of things and get some nice curves, and based on that, and also based on community sentiment, so some units, even though they are kind of like fine, they're very toxic to face and are very hit or miss, and then I made changes to them as well. So it's a mix of the stats and a mix of how people are reacting to certain units. Anyway, we have a lot here, so I'm gonna go through it kind of fast. It's been 20 minutes. It's impressive how I can yap for so long. Myria's cooldown went down for 5 seconds because it is now a solo unit. I think at a 14-second cooldown it's not going to see any play. It didn't see any play before people started comboing it with the insta triggers. So to make it viable without insta triggering it, I moved the cooldown down a lot, and you can still speed it up, right? There's a lot of speed buffs, especially for town. So I think you can still make Myria builds work. They're just not going to be your solo carry anymore, which is fine. I don't want the build to just have 1 or 2 solo carries. I want it to be a mix of all these things perfectly working together and beating your opponent. Cannon, its health went from 150 to 400. It's by far the worst weapon, and giving it a lot of health apparently seemed to do some stuff for it. Like Regis did for the hotfix that we did, he suggested putting this to like 600 HP, and it actually made Cannon kind of fun, because a high health unit, a high health weapon is something we don't really have much of. So I just gave Cannon a bunch of health here to see how it performs. Big laser pointer, this for some reason is just one of the most consistent good weapons. Might be because of the pierce. I'm gonna rework pierce damage in the future. But until then, I'm just gonna put the damage down a bit, because it's still an easy access weapon that is reliably very strong. And until the pierce rework, I think we just need to keep it in check. Dynamite turret, also still one of the best units, even though I had so many nerfs. So I'm just gonna move the cooldown from 1 second to 1.2. Should still be good, especially at getting through defense units, but at least scaling it up like crazy isn't gonna go too nuts. Eternal Bonfire, since the change as well, it actually got pretty bad, because people are not spamming it with just 1 or 2 units anymore. So now I just increase the speed buff slightly. This should still in theory be good if you have 3 cooldown units. You trigger like 20 times for 3%. The numbers look good, so I was scared to even put this up, but I think it can use 3%. It's still a tier 4 unit anyway, so it's fine. Electrocatalyst, this Tinker unit actually didn't get played a lot, but when it got played, it had bad results. So I just messed with the charges. Now it takes less Tinker units to charge up and to actually benefit from, so that way you can probably pick it up earlier and it actually starts triggering. Because I think the issue is that early on it's really bad, it never triggers. Later in the game, sure, it turns better, but by then you usually have a board already that doesn't even rely on it too much, so now you can pick it up earlier and actually start getting some value from it. Bamboo was still on tier 2, this had to be tier 3. This was also a suggestion that we got for the hotfix, and it felt better on tier 3. It was still strong on tier 3, so if it's still too strong, we might look at other changes. But also now with the fix to collision hitboxes, Bamboo has been slightly worse because it combos less well with the Cursed Bell and with the resummon thing. I forgot the name. Oversized crossbow, this surprisingly became a very strong build as well. And that is fine, because you need to set up for it. It's no good early, but the only issue was the pierce damage was, I think, a bit too high. Like, it could wipe so many things in the back of the board and then just destroy your build without you getting a chance to do anything. So pierce again has to be reworked, so until it's reworked, I'm just gonna move this down from 35 to 20. Spellbound rockets, we also talked about this being like very strong. The win rate is still very high, so I'm just moving the damage down. Graveyards, the cooldown, this was also something that was buffed already from the hotfix, but I decided to buff it again because Graveyard is a fun unit and it doesn't see enough play. The tree, now tree is a big nerf, almost half the health, but I think it makes sense. Getting 200 health on 2 units as a tier 1 is actually pretty ridiculous if you think about it, especially with how easy it is to get these. With the proliferator, this also nerfs proliferator indirectly, which is good, so that way I don't have to actually change proliferator, just gotta change trees. And that probably helps with fatigue as well, so now fatigue can at some point start one-shotting trees instead of always having to two-shot every tree, because 40 health is a lot, that's a lot of triggers, so maybe that makes it feel better as well. The Chameleontis, for some reason this was one of the highest win rate weapons. I'm surprised, and I think most people that hear this are surprised as well, because it doesn't have clear synergy with anything, but for a tier 3 weapon it just had really good stats. Probably too good, so I just moved the health down a lot. It's still a decent weapon, still does what it always does, but I wanted to see how just scaling down the health would affect it. Now, Piranha Plant, this is probably one of the bigger changes, also suggested by Regis, which is like a lot of units. Like I said, we want to value flexibility. Like when you see them in the shop, you just want to be able to take them and not have like the notion of, I can't take this, I don't have the synergy for this, it's useless. Piranha Plant almost always felt like it, unless you want to build around it, but to build around it, you got to get it early, because there's no way you pivot into it late, right? Your board is not set up for it. So I want you to be able to pick Piranha Plant early without feeling like it's useless, and I want you to still be able to pivot into it late as well. So it now has a cooldown. It has kept its passive, so if you heal it, it will still attack and trigger, but every 2 seconds it will now also trigger by itself. So you can actually pick it as an early weapon and it will do damage even with no healing. Not a lot of damage, but some damage. I did buff it though from 50 to 80. I think Piranha Plant definitely also needed a damage buff, but we gotta be careful with this guy, because I feel like once you can actually make Piranha Plant work, this can turn into a machine gun. So Piranha Plant was super broken when the Tree of Life still gave 1 health to everything, but it would trigger on 1 health. That's why right now it's set at 2 health. Once Piranha Plant gets 2 health, it triggers, because if it's 1 health for Tree of Life, it would break. Maybe we can revert it, because the Tree of Life only targets 3 nature units right now, but I'm still a bit scared. So let's see first what this does. If this is not impactful enough, I'm gonna put it to 1 second, and then maybe it has a lot more synergies. Warden's Flame, this unit was pretty bad, but also has kind of a high cooldown. Weapons with high cooldown in general are not great, or were not great, so I'm gonna move the cooldown just to 1.8. because you can stack infinite damage on it. If it's too slow, it's still going to perform worse than just a very fast weapon. Atomic Clock, this thing is an interesting unit, but it doesn't see any play, probably because it's tier 5. Paying like 5 mana for an effect like this, it has to be tier 3 at least, so that way you can find it easier and you can actually set up for builds like this easier. And I think it's just an interesting unit anyway. I don't see enough people experiment with it. Saloon is now solo, so this would trigger 2 adjacent town units. Mechanic is now solo, this triggers the Tinker unit. And Rafflesia, ever since the nerf, which is basically like the health that it steals from units reduced, and also it still gets double health, but it's not a defense unit anymore, so it doesn't get targeted by glow berries. Maybe I can turn it back into a defense unit. I'm not sure though, because I'm still a bit scared of glowberry interactions, because it scales on itself then. So instead, I mean, I could make it so glowberries cannot target the unit that is giving the health. But for now, I'm just keeping its tags and I'm just changing it from 15 to 20 HP. That is seals. It's still not a bad unit. The stats were still fine for it, so I don't think we need to make any drastic changes. Compound knowledge. Now this thing doesn't see much play at all, so this is a thing that gives damage based on the town units you have. So I moved the cooldown from 4.2 to 3.5. I think again it's actually decent scaling, but it's just very slow. So speeding it up probably is gonna help with that. Homing missiles. This thing is a very good counter weapon to destroy town. But it doesn't need 150 damage. It already has 50% explosive. I'm just gonna put it to 100. This puts the DPS pretty low because the cooldown is also like 2 seconds or something. So very low DPS, but it's still fine because you're targeting town units. And when you look at the breakpoint of town units, some are under 100 HP and some are over. So this would still destroy like the weaker town units, but this would also destroy the stronger ones most of the time. This will not. Which is very important. You can still scale it easily with Valmir's because it's an explosive unit. Like you can still scale the damage on it, but this way at least there is a bit more counterplay and your board or your town just doesn't get insta wiped. You can still like heal up the weaker town units. There's still many ways like the well and like blacksmith that can heal up your town. Shrub. For some reason Shrub was disgustingly strong. If you look at the stats, it was so good and it makes sense. It has 80 health and it gets 50 for every weapon your opponent has, and most opponents these days have like 4 weapons, so that's 280 health on a tier 1 nature unit that you can just get. I put it to 30. I still kept it plus 50 health. Now this thing I might have to scale down, but I'm just gonna move this down so that way it's still very good if your opponent has a lot of health, but a lot of weapons I mean, but early on at least, the early 1-2 fights where people have 1 or 2 weapons, it's gonna be less strong. Mill is also solo, so can no longer be targeted by the other solo stuff, and this cannot target the solo stuff. Mecha Dragon, I just moved the damage from 100 to 90. It's a pretty strong weapon, but it's nothing crazy, so I'm just gonna move the damage down a bit. Bakery also solo now. Lumberjack, this is also a way to scale your damage on your weapons with the nature units that you have, but the cooldown was 4.4 seconds. I think that's a bit too long as well compared to, for example, other damage scalers that you have, so I put it to 3.6. Forest Spirit, the health buffed slightly and the cooldown also buffed slightly, because Forest Spirit is like on this very tricky balance point where if you buff him too much, he actually can scale out of control very quickly, as we have seen. But it was mainly an issue with the lifesteal and with the cooldown going to 1 second, 0.1. It's actually very hard to get 0.1 seconds right now in the game because all of the speed scaling is now percentage based. Some of it was like flat, like just 0.05 seconds, but that gets out of control very quickly. And making it all percentage based and also having all of it kind of redesigned to not just funnel into one unit, but very often like the campfire, like the bonfire, I mean, or like the power plant that we're going to look at in a second. They need multiple units now to target, so that way you cannot just funnel all your buffs into one. It's an array of units, so it spreads out more, which is more the design philosophy we want anyway. You want your whole board and build working together and scaling together, and not just one thing juicing to the moon, right? So that is kind of the thing. I think we can just buff its health a bit and remove its cooldown and make it a bit better. The pillar also saw so many rounds of nerfs, and at this point it actually got kind of bad. You don't see that much anymore, so I just buffed it slightly. Watchtower also got changed to be percentage based speed buff, but 10% late game on all your town turns out to be incredibly strong. So I just moved it to 7. Because there's no like downside to this. The power line you need to position for this, I mean, you kind of need to position for this. You need empty spaces, but it's still very strong. Latching Spore, I increased the lifesteal a bit. It turns out that since the nerfs to all of the other stuff, Latching Spore is actually not that good. So I put it to 7. I might even bump this more. But again, we're just going to see what the stats say. Because all of this you got to keep in mind, is connected. If I change one thing, I change 5 different units. Changing like mechanic changes all of the Tinker units, right? Changing compound knowledge suddenly means that every weapon is easier to scale, meaning you gotta be careful of the cooldown speed there. So it is all very interconnected, and if there's just a couple combos that break because of this, we can't really foresee that. So I'm trying to be a little bit tamer with some of these changes. Others are way bigger that I think are fine, but we'll see how it goes. And then power plant. So this one is also a bigger rework because it felt bad to pick up a power plant and not have town units to activate it, right? So this was one of those units that could be in the shop, a dead unit that you can't take. Also suggested by Regis. It feels bad. So instead, it's now a passive that always buffs a weapon. So you can always buff weapons with it if you put Tinkers next to it. And speeds up town units based on how many cooldown town units you have. So the wording, it's still tricky. It's still not perfect. There's probably going to be a change to this in the future, but it's already better than what it used to be, which was an entire book. Now, if you have town units, it just targets one and it speeds it up based on the town units you have. Simply put. So that way, if you only have one cooldown town unit, you can still stack that one unit, but it's only by 1%. If you have 5 town units, you are now going to buff something by 5%, but it's out of those 5. So this is, I think, a very nice solution to the issue where you just stack one unit. You can do it, but it's very inefficient. If you have more town, if you want to scale more, but that will mean you scale broader, then you go for it. You just get multiple cooldown units, but it's going to be more RNG heavy and less combo reliant. So I think I like this a lot. Scarecrow also needed a slight buff, was not doing too well, so I moved down the cooldown. That's all the changes. Lots of unit changes, a lot to digest, and I think you just gotta play the game and see how it all goes. Bugs, so unit highlights on the background of the main menu, small bug. Homing landmine and sonic mine for some reason didn't work. They work now. Enchantments, if you had an enchantment and you selected a shop unit, it could break. No more. Units could still overlap, even though I fixed it in the last patch, there was still issues of this. This should have fixed it. I hope so. If I still see a report of units overlapping, I gotta look somewhere else, because I should basically shift focus to this is where the issue is. Try to fix it, try to replicate it. If I can't replicate it anymore, if it seems fixed, then to me that's the best I can do until the issue pops up somewhere else. And then I've been looking at a lot of people had this, and luckily a lot of people, including myself, were recording or streaming, so I can go frame by frame and see at what exact moment it happens, and I track down in the code where that is, and I try to find a solution for it, and I think I found it. If not, then I have to look at a different place in the code again. Enchantment duping, so nobody actually knew about this, but there was one guy on ladder who was duplicating enchantments, and I was able to recreate it. So I was able to figure out how he did it and prevent it. It was a pretty stupid thing, to be honest. I forgot one line of code somewhere. But this is gone. Enemy toy turrets also sometimes didn't spawn incorrectly, and this was like a report that I got a couple times, but it's also applied to other things resummoning not working correctly always for enemies. It was something to do with the collision system. It sometimes didn't update properly. It still worked, like you could still summon trees and all that stuff, but some tiles were like set to be occupied when they were not. This is fixed. And there's like when you scroll in the UI on the combat log, sometimes you would still zoom in the board. And last but not least, the accelerate enchantment was way too strong. Like I said, all the speed increases were percentage based, except for the enchantment. That makes no sense. So now it's also percentage based, which is a whole lot better and less broken. That's it. That's everything in this patch. This was somehow 40 minutes, but I hope you enjoy the breakdown. I'll try to do faster, cleaner breakdowns for every patch from now on. And yeah, that's it. Enjoy the game.